I've probably managed or been involved in about a dozen or so technology RFPs over the last decade. In fact, one of the first ones I remember was, I think, 2005 or 2006. And we were looking for an enterprise collaboration platform. And we decided to go with ClearSpace. And that then became Jive, and I'm not sure exactly what they're doing today. In the early days, it was Scout Labs, Radian 6, Sysomos, Collective Intellect. And more recently, it's been Crimson Hexagon, Brandwatch, Synthesio, Digimind, Pulsar, and others. I've also been a decision maker and or counselor, consultant for RFPs related to social CRM, social publishing platforms like Sprinkler, Spreadfast, and back in the early days, Vitru and Involver. And then more recently, with the rise of employee engagement, employee advocacy, platforms like Dynamic Signal are ones that I've helped kind of manage for clients in terms of helping them identify the right software to meet their business needs. And one of the advantages that I've had working in this industry is that I could pick up the phone or I can send out a tweet and usually get someone on the phone and talk to them about the software. Now, not only do I like to help clients decide what software to use, but I'm also a power user. So I like to dig into the platform, understand where the data comes from, how the data is managed, etc. I very rarely read white papers. I don't necessarily read blogs. I do ask for feedback, and I'll often tap my network and say, hey, anybody have experience with this software? Anybody have experience with that software? So the way that I buy software, or at least consult in buying software, is very different than the average B2B buyer. But not everyone has that advantage. They don't have the time. In fact, most B2B buyers find it very difficult to buy software. It's 6, 12, 18 months of a process in doing so. But don't just take my word for it. Gartner found the same thing a few years ago in a study where they found 77% of B2B buyers rated their purchase experience as being extremely complex. Now, there's a few reasons why this happens, right? There's an abundance of information on the internet. Also, it's not just one decision maker. Typically, there's a group of 5 or 10 stakeholders who are part of the decision-making process, and trying to get everybody to come to a consensus on what to invest in is not always the easiest of things to do. And lastly, the buyer's journey is not linear. It's dynamic, it's unpredictable, it's all over the place. Now, in that same study by Gartner that I referenced a minute ago, they've identified kind of a new buyer's journey, and they reference it as 6 buying jobs that B2B buyers go through when making software investments. And the first one is problem identification. It's coming to the realization that there's an issue and we need to solve it. The second is solution exploration. Is there a vendor out there that actually can solve our problem? And if so, let's talk to them. Requirements building. What exactly do we need this software to do? Fourth is supplier selection. Does this do exactly what we want it to do? Fifth is validation. We think we know the right answer, but we need to be sure. We need to ask other colleagues. We need more demos. We need to read more white papers, etc. And the last one, which is probably the most difficult, consensus creation. That's trying to get everybody who's in the decision-making process on the same page. Now, these buying jobs don't happen sequentially. In fact, they happen simultaneously and all the time. Gartner calls this looping. It's going in and out of these different buying jobs. Now, this is very difficult to look at, right? How do you even decipher what's going on here? Now, these are the things that buyers do as they go through each of these 4 initial buying jobs before going to validation and selection. Now, here's where content comes into play. If you think about all these buying jobs and all the things that they do in order to get information, this is an opportunity for you to intercept that search, intercept that conversation, and begin to influence the buyers through this funnel, through this buyer's journey. So what I've done is I've highlighted the opportunities that I think could be used to build your content strategy. Now, there are only 13 here, but there's probably another 50 or so more, given how dynamic and unpredictable the buyer's journey is. Now, I'm not going to go through each one. I'm going to highlight a few which I think are actionable. But if you look under problem identification, you'll see a couple things. You'll see a web search, you'll see research, you'll see downloading of white papers. These are all things that you can do to create demand, right? You can create content as it relates to a problem in your industry and the software and the fact that your software can solve that particular problem. If you've optimized that content the right way from an SEO standpoint, the buyer will find it through their web search. If you look at solution exploration, you see more searching going on. You see peer discussions and then LinkedIn discussions. If you think about employee advocacy, and internally you probably have subject matter experts who are really smart about technology. And if you equip them to participate online and have conversations with their peers, you can intercept the buyer that way. And it's done so in a way that's very authentic. Again, moving on to requirements building, you see more web searches. You see contact with a former colleague. Again, influencers. Activating an influencer program and doing so in a smart way to influence other people like themselves when it comes to making a technology decision. And then lastly, you have customer testimonials, videos, social media conversations. I mean, these are all pretty straightforward. Now, if this were me, I would map out all the content that I have and map it to each of these buying jobs. I would then think about what I don't have and find those gaps, and then determine what needs to be created. Now, going back to the last video, in understanding audiences and the words that they're using and the language and who they follow and what affinities they have, these are all inputs into a content strategy, into your narrative, into your headlines, your blogs, your search, your paid, your targeting. Everything that you do should be built on that data. And then from there, thinking about the content that you want to use to drive demand. And maybe it's a white paper or an ebook that you want to collect email addresses. And then the content for awareness and consideration and all those other things that are important in the B2B planning process. So thanks again for tuning in today. I really appreciate your time. And thanks for the opportunity for me to share my thoughts and opinions and perspectives as it relates to audiences, influencers, data, and content. We're going to shift the conversation next week a little bit and talk about measurement. I'm going to talk about share of voice and whether or not that's important, and then dig into what I'm calling share of audience attention. So you don't want to miss that. Thanks again. Have a great week, and I'll see you next time.